Welcome to another episode of the Supply Chain Lab, where we explore the key issues shaping today's supply chains. I'm your host, Shihluke Maluleke, and today we're honored to have Phenny Ramuedzisi, Business Unit Leader at the Auditor-General of South Africa, as our guest. Phenny leads the Audit Risk Intelligence team and has significantly impacted audit practices by spearheading the development of South Africa's first multi-year audit plan. This forward-looking approach enables the AGSA to provide valuable insights on critical issues like water security, health, education, and public fund usage, ensuring these resources improve citizens' lives. In this episode, we'll discuss the role of ethical procurement in ensuring accountability and compliance and its influence on public confidence. Phenny will share insights from the Auditor-General's Office on common procurement oversights and how these can be systematically addressed. We'll also explore how formalizing procurement as a discipline of financial management could cultivate more ethical professionals and transform supply chains in South Africa. But first, let's get to know Phenny and hear more about her journey and what has shaped her career. Phenny, welcome to the Supply Chain Lab. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Shihluku, and looking forward to the session today.
So I think we should start with just giving our listeners a little bit of insight into what you do, who you are, and your thoughts about ethical procurement.
So, so who's Phenny? So I grew up in Polokwane, one of 4 kids. Both my parents were principals. So already that gives you a sense of, look, we were living in a family of learning and development. So those really become core to me. Teaching others, but also learning myself about new things. You know, I'm a true proponent of curiosity. So I've always tried to explore a lot of things, not necessarily why and how they work, but how do they fit in globally in terms of the things they have to do. So that's something that I've always been interested in as a child and also growing up. In terms of auditing and why I went into the profession, look, yes, I was good at maths, I was good in accounting, but the big thing was really around, picking the highest one, picking the one with the highest marks. And that's how I got to auditing. Yes, I also got a bursary, which also helped me. But I remember when we went into my bursary interview, they actually had to ask me, like, why this route? And I had to deeply reflect. And I said, look, there's not a lot of black females in this profession, and I want to be part of that change. And that's one of the main reasons why I came into the profession. Ethical procurement. Look, I think ethical procurement is one proponent of enabling economic activity within the country. Yes, it's a space within businesses. It's a space within public sector, but the bigger function of it is that it does drive economic development. It does drive ethics within it. It does drive reputation and build trust within the country itself, as much as it is within your space and your institutions. But it does play a bigger role in terms of value of money, of services being procured, goods and services quality, and so forth. And so this, and as the AGSA, this is a space that we're in because our mandate as an institution is really around enabling democracy by effecting and really playing oversight and making sure that government is transparent in the things that they have to do, especially when it comes to financial management. And again, within financial management, supply chain is it plays a big role in it because that's essentially where our taxpayers' money is going into. But also that's where the citizens will be able to get their goods and services and essentially service delivery from government.
Okay. I think you've given us a good base on what to start with regards to ethical procurement. I like how you touched on how important procurement is in both the private and the public sector, and I guess also just for our economy as South Africa. So could you just share some insights into how unethical procurement practices have impacted public finances and I guess the broader South Africa?
Let me call it, maybe let me start on the opposite side, which is essentially to say there's a really big, strong link between ethics and reputation of institutions, right? Because in that's how you build trust. Ethics, reputation equates to trust. And that trust is trust to investors. That trust is business trusting what they're doing, communities trusting in what you're doing as well. That's how you build market share, your customers. But essentially and ultimately, and especially us in the public sector, it's about citizens. So building that trust with them. And so in the organization, we have a saying called, and we call it, ethics is our license to trade. That means that that license is what strengthens institutions and what they need to do at large. But also that license is also about promoting good governance. Because, if people trust you, they'll be able to rely on you on so many avenues, and especially if you think of the most vulnerable, it just makes their life easier at the end of the day. And so when you start to think of the opposite now, to say that unethical practices, what does that mean? If you don't have trust, if your reputation is not where it's supposed to be, no one is going to trust you. And we've seen institutions where unethical behaviors and the reputation was tarnished in regards to procurement, but also other like governance issues. And so the impact is that at the end of the day, it's a lived experience of citizens who get impacted because your whole governance structure crumbles. You're unable to manage your finances. You're unable to account and be transparent in the things that you're doing. And that and all then affects the lived experience of citizens. So, I thought let me also just share some of our latest audit outcomes. So we issued the local government, which is mainly the municipality space, the outcomes recently. And, with regards to supply chain and the non-compliance around that space, about 64% of our municipalities had non-compliance around SEM regulations. That already shows you how dire it is. And you know what? It's mainly around uncompetitive, unfair procurement processes that we are finding in that space. It's about awarding contracts that are inflated, the prices are inflated. It's about having unethical procurement that undermines economic development. The one area that we also look at in our space is institutions that would need to promote local content. So we're saying, look, as a supply chain, some of your products, just make sure that they are produced in SA. And we're finding that, in that space, we found that 39% of municipalities don't. And when we started quantifying those awards, it was about 1.8 billion. That's a lot. And so those, again, some of the findings. One key flagship work that we did was also around COVID, when we got the big bailout, and we had to undertake the COVID audit, where again, I'm sure you're seeing now in the papers around some of the SIU findings and investigations that are going on. And if you think about it, during that time, that was a time where the whole world was in crisis, where the most vulnerable needed assistance, where every single citizen, we got impacted, but yet you still had SCM procurement issues in that space. And that's what unethical behavior actually equates to. It sums up to, it's not just about the rands and cents alone, but it's also about the people and that impact in that space.
Yeah, and I guess it's not just the everyday citizen, but it also impacts investors from outside of South Africa, their willingness to then assist and to fund the various activities that happen in the country.
Absolutely. So that trust that I'm talking about, you're literally building trust of investors, people who can trust in you, people who can trust their funds within you as organizations. And so that's how big I feel like SCM is, because it's all about you interacting with the external party. You're going to partner with suppliers. I've always been quite interested in sustainability and ethical sourcing. And one of the key, lessons I'm learning from it is about, with the space, when you partner with someone, when you decide, because it's a contract, it's a contractual relationship, when you partner with that supplier, you're also taking on their reputation, because you're going to be associated with them. They're also going to be associated with you. And sometimes, again, you need to think bigger than the rands and cents. It's about that type of relationship building that happens also in this space.
I think that's quite fair, and it's great that we have somebody that has the front row seat on the impact of unethical procurement practices. How does your organization then ensure that processes are more ethical and there's more transparency in a lot of the processes?
So what we do as an organization is we audit government, the entirety of government. So there's like more than 1,000 institutions sitting in national, provincial, and also municipal space. So as part of our work, and I guess our mandate is we need to audit and report. And that in itself, I guess, highlights the transparency part of our work. So we audit 3 areas, one being financial audit. So the financial statements, we audit those. And I guess that happens both in private and public sector. But we go further in public sector in that we audit the compliance. And that's mainly where SCM sits. And we also audit performance information. And performance information is mainly service delivery. So basically, government needs to account on what they've done in terms of service delivery. So our SCM work is centered around compliance because within public sector, and I guess that's also one of the big differences between private and public sector is public sector is highly regulated. So there's a lot of regulations that mandate how procurement should happen. And so our work is focused on that. So yes, once we audit and report, we issue audit reports, we issue management reports, and management reports really will detail to management what are the core findings we picked up and how can they strengthen them. So we also provide recommendations in that regard. But what we do further is with all these 1,000 audits, we then aggregate them. So what we call, we aggregate them into a general report. And this report basically gives a high level sense of trends and analysis and core things that we picked up during our audits. And within that, we also provide high level recommendations to everyone, because that report belongs to you and me, to Parliament, to government as well. So you can easily pick up our general report to see the outcomes that we've picked up. So that's our way and our form of also being transparent to the country to say, look, these are the things we've picked up. We further also have regular engagement with our stakeholders. So whether it be, I think ordinarily in an audit, you will meet the CEO, the board. So we'll meet those key stakeholders within the institutions. But we go further. We then go to Parliament because all those institutions need to account to Parliament. Interestingly enough, this week, actually the next 3 weeks, we've got we call them BRRR sessions where we go together with the entities, institutions, and we go and account to Parliament to say this is what we found. So if you've got time, quickly go to parliamentary channels, social media. Those are happening where our teams are out there, also again being transparent and sharing what we found in our spaces. So that's also another form of accountability that we play. And I guess it's not only national, it's not only Parliament, but it's also legislatures sitting in the provinces as well, councils sitting in the various municipalities as well. So that's what we do. And then there's also other initiatives that we run where we also try then engage respective forums. We engage a lot with the CSO, the civil society organizations as well, because we are a strong believer in multi-stakeholder engagements, what we're calling the accountability ecosystem. And that essentially says all of us have got a role to play, whether it's you, me as citizens, me as an auditor, others as accounting officers within the various institutions, oversight. So everyone has got a role to play to ensure that government functions and that the culture within government shifts to one that is really doing good for citizens and will really shift and change the lived experience of citizens. And in that, we are engaging a number of, let's call them non-government institutions, where we're really trying to say, guys, let's come together to make it work. We're being transparent with you, they've been transparent, so how can we come together to really just strengthen the ecosystem, the accountability mechanisms within public sector?
Okay, sounds like you guys are very busy. You're doing a lot of hard work. So in your experience, what do you think are the common red flags when it comes to irregularities? What do you uncover in your audits, especially related to procurement processes, and what steps can be taken to prevent these in the future?
Okay, so let me touch on some of them, because this sometimes too long. But look, I think as much as we're auditors, I always say we're also citizens. So we really want to make government work. Just because we issue findings doesn't mean we get excited and we've got a red flag, so therefore it's an issue. But we're really trying to work with government to make it function and make it work. Because again, for us, it's all about the citizen. If it works, it affects them and it impacts them positively. So one of the key irregularities that we find in the space is really around unfair and uncompetitive procurement practices. And that really talks about goods and services, being procured at a lower price. It speaks to institutions appointing suppliers that don't meet criteria, meaning that the quality of goods and services are not where they're meant to be. You've got bids being evaluated against different criteria than what was really supposed to be done. You've got also suppliers who literally just are unable to deliver what they got the bid for. And so those are the things that we start picking up. Others then talk about poor planning in terms of your procurement, meaning that your cost benefit analysis, that against the cost of of this product. So the cost of the ownership of the product, it's not properly being assessed, meaning that you go into a procurement process to get this device, but then you don't necessarily consider everything else that follows, that comes along with the device. And so therefore the entire process, it just looks like it wasn't properly planned. Others also look like pricing. You need to benchmark on prices. You need to make sure that, because it's your responsibility to ensure and protect your institution around overpayment of certain goods and services. So those are the things that we pick up. Others, which I guess comes right at the end of the procurement cycle, is more the payment, poor payment practices as well, where you find, because it's delays now, as an institution, you need to pay interest and penalties. You find also instances where the contracts are just not managed properly. And so, again, you can quantify the cost of that impact. And then lastly, overpayments. We are finding instances where there's duplicate payments, which really, it's small things, but they do have a massive impact in institutions and the financial management thereof.
Yeah, I mean, those are quite scary issues. I think both for public and private sector. I think the private sector also sometimes has these same issues. Obviously, it's not as it's not spoken about as much as the public sector. I know you guys in the public sector really face intense scrutiny when it comes to procurement. I don't know if you have any examples with regards to unethical procurement. I mean, I can already think of a few. And what that has cost the country. And I mean, sometimes the cost is not like a money or financial cost. Sometimes it could just be like a broken trust kind of cost, or I don't know if you've got any examples around that.
So I'm going to put a little bit of a spin to it. So the impact, let's call it over the years. So our work around procurement has been there for more than a decade, right? For many years. And so we saw the trend in terms of, look, this thing is, it's not getting better. And then we had to reflect as an institution to say, but what can we do? In 2019, our mandate as the institutions got expanded, where we were now able to enforce our recommendations. So there's a process, and if you read our reports, you'll see it coming quite often around material irregularity. The media calls it having teeth now. We've got a bit more teeth. And so that essentially came because of the history of lack of consequences. So yes, we found the transgressions, we reported them, we told, there was transparency around these findings, but we found that the consequences were not as impactful as we'd want them to be. And so these powers then essentially were given to us to enable that. So essentially once we find a transgression, we analyze it and assess it, we determine it and confirm that it's a material irregularity. We then give that recommendation, now that it's enforceable. We give it to the accounting officer and say, look, we found this. do something about it, because if you don't do it, these could be potentially the consequences. So examples of what has happened and the outcome of it is, look, there has been recovery of financial losses where the auditees were able to go to the suppliers and get back money where we found transgressions. The auditees were also able to, do further investigations around these transgressions and really find out the root cause. And some of them actually resulted in contracts being stopped, which is quite good, if you think of, again, that ripple effect of financial management. So maybe taking the material irregularity to a law enforcement agency to do, more investigations around it. So again, these powers have really enabled us to go to that extent to try really just curb the culture of non-compliance within the SCM processes. But again, it's not really centered around only SCM, even others, but I guess for this conversation, yeah. So look, in our latest, the local government general report that I was speaking about, we have found that it has been impactful. We found that the overpricing of goods and services again came about, and so therefore we're able to issue material irregularities around that to prompt that accounting officer to be able to do something about it. Uneconomical procurement as well, also again around overpricing, doing more work around that. I think in the latest report we've reported that and we've identified that accounting officers have actually recovered about 200 million financial losses, which is amazing. When you start thinking of the quantum of these values, some of the about 400 million is in the process of being investigated, and then 200 million has been prevented, and that could potentially mean that the contract was stopped or they recovered it from, they're in the process of also recovering it. So a lot of work and a lot of impact has been seen through this material irregularity process, again, to try to curb the unethical behaviors that we are seeing in the space.
And I guess the media doesn't make as much noise when it comes to some of the good work that is being done.
I think they do. I just think, I always say our country's got a lot of issues. It's got a lot of problems. But look, we do report on it. So, our reports we issue twice a year at the moment, but we are exploring issuing more reports, where in the general report, there will be a section on material irregularity. So a lovely chapter in terms of the stories. Some of it is about the stories that we are picking up. We tell we give a bit of fat and meat around what happened at a particular municipality, what kind of goods and services were picked up. So there's a lot of there's a wealth of knowledge in the reports. But we would like to engage more around it. Parliament does sometimes call us to account around this process, where we also do share more around the space. But you're right, maybe there is opportunity to speak about these even more and really just outlay the process and the benefits of it.
Yeah, I think so. So I know one of the big issues when it comes to procurement is that it's not as formalized as accounting. I know that there are still some CAs that do some dodgy things and do get caught out, but I feel like it's much less than what we're finding in procurement. And you're a CA, so I'd like to know if you believe that if we were to formalize the procurement or the supply chain profession through similar standards and certifications that you get as a CA, do you think this could help in cultivating more ethical professionals?
Look, absolutely. I think it could. So a couple of pointers. Formalizing the profession means that there will be standards around procurement, but they'll also be accompanied with ethical standards. That's what we've seen in a lot of professions. This code of ethics, which really help, I guess, the members to live in a certain way, to maintain a certain standard of ethics. And so that could definitely help. So that's one area. Another one is, because you've got these code of ethics, these standards, that means there would be consequences should you transgress. And so therefore, again, what we see is that also would help members in terms of reducing the unethical behaviors that you'd see in the profession. Another element is what we call CPD, so continuous professional development. That's what a lot of the professional bodies have, where they're saying, yes, you're accredited, you are in this body, you've got this you've got this accreditation. And so because you've got it, it doesn't mean it's a once-off. On a continuous basis, there'll be a whole host of training to make sure you're kept abreast in the environment that you're working in, trends coming from regionally, globally, internationally as well. And also in terms of ethical training. So as SAICA, we are mandated to make sure at least once a year you've got some level of ethical training that you have. So again, pushing the ethical, culture that you would really like to see in that profession. And lastly, as well, with professional bodies is a lot of them are just not only within SA. You've got them globally. And that also gives one an opportunity to just really benchmark and get a sense and see what's happening outside your space. Yes, maybe similar countries, but also countries that are way different or even way advanced, just to get a sense of what tools are they using, materials and so forth. And that really gets one to be up to, I guess a well-rounded, professional bodied individual. Yeah.
And I think with not having the profession formalized, if I do something unethical in one country and in one company, I can easily move to another company as long as nobody, I don't inform anybody and it isn't written anyway. So I guess this is how also the professionals kind of move around.
Absolutely.
So let's just talk a little bit about the private sector for a moment. How does ethical procurement in the private sector compare to the public sector? Are they similar challenges, or do you think they differ in significant ways?
So we're not privy. We're actually not privy to that type of data, right? But I mean, when you step back to look at similarities, I think, procuring products, the cost, or rather costing of products, value for money, I think those are similarities that you'd find in both areas. When you start thinking of private sector, their goal is about profit making. It's also about market share, but it's also about shareholder value. When you look at our side in terms of public, again, there you're talking more taxpayer money. You're talking service delivery and making sure that, some people that you're going to procure for don't have the money to actually, like when we had the load shedding crisis past couple of months ago, the fortunate people were able to get solar, but there were ones who were not able to. And so public sector caters for both. And so when you start thinking of what public sector stands for, it stands for those citizens, the vulnerable, but essentially the entire country. So those are some of the, I guess, differences. But in terms of more, let's call it, the practices, what happens, I think both do have policies and procedures in the relevant institution. However, public sector, it's strong around regulations and legislation and within SCM. So it's heavily regulated. And I guess for them, it's all about making sure you're getting something, that's value, that's all value, that's economical, that's fair, competitive, because it's not about the goods and service. It's about you creating competitiveness within the environment. It's about you enabling economic activity, so Phenny can't always be getting the contract, get it to someone else as well, but also make sure you meet the requirements. So there's a lot of checks and balances in terms of what public sector does. And I feel like that's also one of the core differences between them and private sector because of the legislation surrounding SCM.
I mean, I like what you said with regards to what the KPIs or the key focus of the private sector are versus the public sector. And I think this also helps the private sector in curbing some of the unethical behavior, because nobody wants to pay an inflated price when they don't need to, because that obviously then impacts their profits. And obviously that's profit is king. And so they never want anybody touching that. But could we then maybe use some of the practices in the private sector to promote ethical procurement in the public sector, do you think?
Absolutely. Look, as I said, I'm not too privy in terms of private sector in terms of what happens. But I think it is worthwhile that the two sectors maybe meet up. Like you're talking about creating a body, maybe creating those type of forums. to share insights, to share best practice, to say, you know what, how best can we just, as an entire sector, without comparing between private and public, how do we strengthen this sector to make sure the ethical standards are where they're meant to be? So I think there's potentially lessons to be learned from both, which could really just enhance, I guess, operations and how this industry works.
Yeah, actually, I do think if companies and like if the public and private sector worked more collaboratively, it would also benefit the private sector in that some of the unethical practices that are happening in the public sector do impact them as well. So this collaboration could kind of remove some of the hindrance due to unethical behavior.
And just to add as well, I mean, if you look at public sector, who do they procure from? Mainly, they procure from private sector.
Yeah.
So the two of them could really work well together in terms of just creating that that synergy between the two sectors. So definitely.
So let's just hear about some of the tough situations you faced in your profession, and how have you challenged the status quo to uphold integrity and transparency in your own career?
No, I'm giggling because I can't think of an example, right? But and I think I needed, even thinking about it now, I think one of the core reasons is being a CA, falling under SICA and the ethical standards that we have. So in my career, I've always had those to guide me in terms of when you're faced with an unethical situation, what needs to be done. So I think I've been fortunate enough in that our profession has done that for us. So that's one part. Another part is, as an organization, we have strong policies and procedures around ethics. So again, guided by that, we've got a CRO, a Chief Risk Officer, we've got a Head of Ethics as well. So you always have someone to bounce off, I guess concerns or any dilemmas that you're faced with. And again, we also have a code of conduct, we've got values. So there's a lot of guidance that we have or I've had in terms of the way I've been in my journey, the way I've operated in my journey. And so therefore, you always question, you always have to ask. I think I've always said, look, if I'm stuck with something, if I'm unsure as to what the impact is going to be, is this unethical, is it not? Just ask. Ask the people. Consult if you need to consult. If you feel like something is not right, chances are maybe something is not right. But again, ask and consult. So that's how I've actually operated throughout my journey. I mean, recently I had to also go through an SCM process in terms of appointing a service provider. And my SCM guys know, they're sitting right next to me because again, they're the subject matter experts. My administrator as well, phone call away from our ethics team. Should we have challenges around certain things, they're right here. But look, I always say you can't know everything. You are going to be faced with challenges, but you're not alone, especially if you're working in an organization. Ask, consult, speak to others who might have gotten, the same dilemma as you have, because that's the only way to get yourself right in terms of not breaching any ethics, but also, again, going back to your institution, making sure that your institution maintains the standard, but also maintains their reputation around ethics as well.
I think that's quite good advice, and I guess it also helps to just create transparency around the things that you don't know. I think sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and even when asking somebody and their recommendation maybe doesn't resonate with you and your own personal beliefs and values, it does help to kind of bring somebody into that situation just to have like a second ear to ensure that you aren't taking part in something unethical unknowingly.
I always say when you sign something, be 100% sure that what you're signing, whether it be the contract, you need to have comfort because it's your signature. Again, I've been talking a lot about the reputation of institutions, but we individuals as well have a reputation to maintain. So just make sure. Rather ask if you're not sure, but definitely make sure.
Yeah, that you understand what's in the contract, what you're signing for, and that it's fair.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so if we look into the future, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges in maintaining ethical procurement, especially as the world becomes more digital and interconnected?
Ooh, our world. Look, it's moving at a fast pace. The digitization, the interconnectedness, very fast pace. And a couple of things that come to mind. It brings complexities in the types of products we're going to have to procure. I mean, if you look at, I always say, look at SpaceX. They've got these spaceships that now seem to be like buses because they're regularly going to space. So your products are going to differ to what we're ordinarily used to. Costing as well. I'm sure with that, there's really big complexities around costing, best price, market value. You're going to find new products where you're going to struggle in terms of what is the market value for this. We're talking about benchmarking earlier. So those are the other complexities. When you start looking at sustainability and also social responsibility, again, it's not just about the product anymore, but it's about the ripple effect and the impact it has down the line. So again, those are other complexities to bring in. Technologies, AI. Depending on how you program your AI, it can also bring in biases. So biases in terms of maybe your AI is going to pick a certain supplier all the time, So those again are things to also watch out for. But I guess more so for us in public sector, that legislation that I keep talking about, with these changes and complexities, it does ask for us to always regularly review the legislation. Is it relevant? Is it not? So again, in our spaces, it does become important. But lastly, the skills. I think all those things that I said, it does require you to not be comfortable with what you have now. So to your viewers, to your students, it's going to be important that they just keep up to date in terms of all the developments that happen. Whether it's, just listening to a podcast, maybe coming to you as a lecturer and say, help in this space. But you cannot just be comfortable with the education, qualification that you have. You need to involve your knowledge around all these things. But also in involving your knowledge, I remember that curiosity I was talking about. You can't just be, okay, this is it. This is what it looks like. But it's about how does this fit in the bigger world? How does it work? How does it function? Because again, things are evolving. If you don't do that, you will be left behind.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think a lot of jobs that people are doing now will not exist in the future, or will not exist in the same kind of way, and will not require their kind of skills, especially, in supply chain. I'll tell you that it's such an evolving field, and it needs such a vast type of skills. We have a lot of people in accounting taking supply chain work because they understand the numbers. We have people in engineering because they understand the processes. So I 100% agree. People definitely need to, make sure that they stay up to date with regards to what the industry and the public sector will need in the future, or try and predict it. At least they have ChatGPT to help them. To help them predict what jobs will exist in the future. So what advice would you give to both public and private sector leaders who are committed to improving their procurement practices?
So for me, it's about lead by example, right? And there, it's not about you just looking at your leader to lead you, but you as individuals are a leader in your own right. And so embody ethical values, embody integrity, make sure you're fair in what you do, make sure you're transparent as well in what you do, in your decision making, in your day-to-day work, because that does cultivate and create a culture of ethics within your spaces. Invest in professionalizing yourself. Again, the training that we were speaking about earlier, just make sure that, yes, be up to date in terms of what's happening, the technical parts of it, but also, again, the other parts in terms of ethics. Grab a code of ethics from anywhere else. Ethics is more or less the same everywhere. And so, yes, maybe you might not be in a professional body, but read up and just understand the space and what it means. Also, look up latest tools and technology in your spaces, keep yourself abreast in terms of the things that are happening. Look, another thing that I spoke about earlier is the accountability ecosystem. You need to understand that you're not alone. You don't work in a silo individually, but also even your institution. Reach out to others, build a network where you can bounce ideas off, where you can test thinking, you can understand best practice. Currently now, the new Procurement Act is out, Procurement Act is out. But again, it doesn't have regulations, would normally give a bit more detail as to what the act is about. So when it does go out for consultation, participate. I always say we are fortunate in our country, in our democracy, that it allows us for, that space to say when a department or when a municipality issues something, it goes out to the public for inputs. Participate in that, because that's our right to actually make an impact. And so, those I think are the few things that I can actually give to your students around, and I guess your listeners around, just some advice to just help. I hope it helps in the industry.
Yeah, I like what you've said with regards to some of the advice you've given. I also think what can be quite overwhelming, because as much as people hear supply chain quite a bit, it is quite a new field, and I think what can be overwhelming for a lot of professionals when it comes to professionalizing the field is thinking that they have to start from scratch. But because there are bodies like SAICA and they probably the field needs to kind of consult with those bodies to kind of get ideas on how they can find ways to start to try and professionalize the field, instead of maybe trying to start from scratch and creating their own rules and regulations and ethics. I think if something already exists and it's working well, you can borrow it and kind of use it in another field.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and highlighting the critical role that ethical procurement plays in both financial accountability and governance. However, before we wrap up, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, perhaps a message on the importance of integrity and transparency in all aspects of business and government.
Look, for me, it's about all of us remembering that we are citizens of this country. We make the country. I always say we make the DNA, and I know now there's a new phrase, no DNA, just RSA, but it's exactly that, each of us, whatever we do, we influence the culture of the country. And so when it comes to ethics, if you're ethical in what you're doing, you are contributing to a more ethical country and practices within whatever institution that you find yourself in. And so continue that. Do that if you're not doing it, but continue that if you are. Let's strengthen it. I think for me, the accountability ecosystem also becomes a big part in that you're also not alone. Let's use the networks. Let's make sure that everyone who's supposed to do something, whether it's within supply chain, whether it's private or public sector, let's make sure we're all doing our roles and we're doing it well, because that's how we're going to get our country to where we want it to be. The reputation of our country, the finances, the financial management, but essentially that's how we're going to strengthen our democracy, by enabling those transparency and governance processes, because those are the ones that really build trust. And once we build trust, as we said earlier, it will definitely then have that effect that we want on the lived experiences of our citizens.
I think that is some excellent advice, and I do hope to see a little bit more collaboration between, obviously, the private sector and the public sector, between academia and both, as well as between different professions. I think there's a lot that I've learned from what you've spoken about today, and we in completely different professions. And I really appreciate your time coming to speak to us. We know you have a very important job, so we do appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing for South Africa. And I hope everybody understands from this episode what the impact is, not just in their everyday life, but to the everyday citizen of South Africa. Thank you so much for coming to the Supply Chain Lab. We really appreciate it. It was a pleasure having this conversation, and I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
Thank you. I did. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.